Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get into this week's show. Friends, lovers, listeners, happy Wednesday, happy hump day, and happy Sex on the Peach day. It is finally time for this season's Ask Peach. And first of all, thank you to everyone who sent in questions for this episode. Honestly, I really appreciate how open and honest and nuanced so many of you were, and the fact that you trust me with these situations. You didn't just ask, how do I spice it up in the bedroom? You asked about fantasy and power dynamics, emotional spirals, whether it's normal to miss being selfish even when you're in love. Spoiler, it is. But anyway, it's wild to think back to season 1 when I put out my first Ask Peach and received about 10 questions and was able to answer them all. And now here we are 4 seasons in, and I receive enough questions for about 10 of these episodes. So as always, I'm so sorry if there just hasn't been enough time to answer everything that was sent in. It's usually because I truly believe there will be an episode coming this season that I will be able to cover that question in. But every season that passes, the more questions that come in every time I do this episode, it honestly means so much that so many more people are willing to be open and vulnerable with me and allow me to answer these questions publicly, because by doing so, I would hope I may also be inadvertently helping someone else who may be going through the same or a similar thing and hasn't felt comfortable to ask or to talk to someone about it yet. So thank you. Also, yes, a lot of you sent in questions that may or may not have been thinly veiled attempts to ask about my new relationship. Subtle, real subtle. I see you, but you already had a 90-minute episode about that. And I'm absolutely certain there will be much more to come on that as we move through the episodes. And truly, this episode isn't about me. It's about you, your sex lives, your questions, all the messy, brave, beautiful attempts at figuring this whole intimacy thing out, which I don't think any of us ever will. But hey, it's fun trying. So get comfy and let's get into it. Here is Ask Peach 4.0. My partner and I have amazing sex. Like loud, grab the headboard, blackout orgasm kind of sex. But I keep fantasizing about being absolutely ruined by strangers. Not just threesomes or role play, but like full-on anonymous kink club vibes. I haven't told him because I worry it will either freak him out or make him feel inadequate. Is it normal to crave something so different from what you already enjoy? And how do I explore that without wrecking what we have? Okay. We can be deeply satisfied and still deeply curious. Welcome to the human brain, where we can be having the most mind-blowing sex of our lives and still fantasize about being blindfolded and passed around like a joint at a Berlin sex party. This doesn't mean anything is wrong with your relationship. it does mean you are sexually imaginative. And what you're craving, it doesn't mean it's better than what you have. It's just different. And that's often what fantasy is. It's contrast. It's not a critique of the things we are already experiencing. And the intimacy you have with your partner is probably what allows your brain to go there, because safety makes space for risk, even if it's just in your mind. So you can be having incredible sex. Congrats, by the way, on all the sex. Sounds dreamy. I'm sure a lot of people would be envious. And you can still find your mind wandering into darker, stranger, more extreme territory. And that doesn't mean you are unsatisfied. It means you are human, and we can be complex, erotic, multi-layered, and imaginative. The idea that sexual satisfaction should or would cancel out fantasy is a complete myth. You're not ungrateful or broken for being curious. I want us to evolve enough to know that satisfaction and desire can safely coexist. And what you are describing, being absolutely ruined by strangers, is an intense fantasy, sure, but it's not rare. A hell of a lot of people fantasize about being overwhelmed, used, or objectified in some way, not because they want to be mistreated, but because the context allows them to surrender control, to stop performing, to stop thinking, to submit. And that can be deeply erotic, especially for people who are high functioning or always in charge in other areas in life. It's less about the strangers and more about you in a different headspace. And this is also where context matters, because what turns us on in our minds doesn't always match what we want in real life. You might never actually want to be touched by a stranger in a dark club, but the idea of it, the forbiddenness, the loss of control, the anonymity, it lights up a different part of your brain. It's like your sex life is a well-made cocktail and your fantasies are shotgunning tequila on a rooftop at 2 a.m. And both are valid. I mean, you might also actually want to experience it, and that is going to be something for you to figure out. But what do you do with all of this? Because before bringing it up with your partner, normalize it in your own head first. Get comfortable with the idea that fantasy is not betrayal. It's not a verdict on your relationship. It's data. It's information. Yes, intriguing, spicy, sometimes chaotic data, but it is still just information to get comfortable with as something that you are trying to understand about yourself. And talk to your partner carefully and honestly, and most importantly, with zero pressure. You know, you could just say, I've been having this fantasy that turns me on a lot. I don't need it to happen, and I'm not asking for anything, but I think it would be hot to tell you about it. You know, you're not presenting it as a 5-point business proposal, but you are offering them a peek into your erotic brain, which is a good thing, and it shouldn't feel threatening. So tone is going to be pretty much everything here. It's not our sex is lacking, so here's my solution. It's our sex is amazing, and this fantasy lives in a totally different neighborhood in my brain that I want to tell you about. And the more it's framed as play and curiosity and exploration, the safer it will feel. Because even if you never go to a kink club and invite strangers into the bedroom, you can absolutely start to experiment with the energy of that fantasy. And that's where things could get really fun. Your partner could absolutely pretend to be anonymous. You could meet at a bar and role play as strangers. He could blindfold you and speak less, touch you more, and make it feel less personal and more primal. Just for one night, that's something that you could try. There are so many ways to evoke that thrill without crossing a line that might make either of you feel uncomfortable. And this is where our fantasies can actually become collaborative, because it's probably safer not to expect your partner to match your fantasy. I mean, they might, but you can hopefully expect them to meet your honesty with however they feel about it. They might be totally into it. They might be turned on by how turned on you are, or they might have a more vanilla template and feel insecure or threatened by it, or just confused. And none of those things are a failure. They are just a starting point for a conversation. And you get to assure them, I'm not dissatisfied. I love what we have. I also really enjoy this version of me in my mind, and I'm curious if we can find a way to find a bridge between the two. Even if that bridge is just storytelling or dirty talk, it can still bring you closer. And not all fantasies need to be enacted to be real. Sometimes the hottest, wildest fantasies live best inside us. And that can be a kind of fuel. Like reading erotica for kinks you probably would never try in real life, or watching porn that doesn't necessarily reflect your daily desires but still hits a dopamine spot. Those fantasies don't always have to be fulfilled. And sometimes that's also the thrill in them. It's the mystery, and maybe the reality of what they might actually be like is actually less exciting. And obviously that's for you to navigate over time and figure out. But sometimes they just want to be acknowledged, stroked, shared, and enjoyed. Like a secret crush you don't need to act on to feel alive. But no, you are not weird. You are not broken. You are not a traitor to your good sex life. You are curious. You are sexually awake and imaginative and probably a little bit kinky. And most importantly, brave enough to ask, what else could this be? So just make sure your partner knows you are bringing them in on the fantasy, not replacing them with it, because that will make all the difference. I slept with someone I've been friends with for years, and now they are acting completely normal while I am spiraling. We agreed it was just casual, but I feel like I've been hit by a hormone truck. Is this an oxytocin hangover, or have I caught feelings and I'm just lying to myself? Also, how do you go back to being friends after good sex, or do you end up just letting the friendship die? Okay, I'm going to do a whole ass episode on the time I fell for a friend that I was being intimate with, because it's a whole thing. And it felt huge at the time. And now I look back at that period of my life and think, what the hell was I thinking? So first of all, take a deep breath. You are not overreacting, and you are definitely not the first person to think, I can totally handle this, only to find yourself Googling how to stop catching feelings like someone who swore they were chill 5 minutes ago. Let's do the sciencey part, which I know you all think is boring, but it is important because it's also actually very validating. What you are feeling is absolutely real. And as I think you are aware of from your question, there's a very physical reason for it. During sex, your brain releases a cocktail of hormones, a fucking Long Island iced tea, if you will, including oxytocin, which is often called the bonding hormone. It's released during orgasm, during cuddling, during eye contact, and especially in situations that already carry emotional intimacy, like sex with someone you know well and trust. Your physical body isn't emotionally neutral or impartial. It doesn't go, okay, we agreed this was casual, so I'll keep it strictly platonic. Nope, your body goes, intimacy, closeness, safety, we must be in love now. That rush of oxytocin can feel like falling literally into something deeper, even if your brain intellectually knows you agreed this wasn't a romantic situation. So it's like your biology and your social agreement are reading from very different scripts. You are trying to stick to the casual vibe, but your nervous system is making you feel like you just met your soulmate at a music festival and you are ready to quit your job and move into a van and travel the world together, living on nothing but matcha and vibes. And what's difficult is they might not be feeling that same hormonal spiral. And that doesn't mean they are cold or heartless or using you. It might just mean they are currently wired differently, or they process that intimacy in a totally different way. Some people compartmentalize sex very effectively. Some people don't release as much oxytocin. I am very capable of having casual sex without feelings, so maybe that's the way my hormones operate. And some people are just more practiced at keeping their boundaries clear. And it doesn't make either person better or worse. People are just different. But as long as people are actually handling everything respectfully, obviously, yes, if someone starts acting like a complete asshole about it, that is not okay. But if they are simply sticking by the agreement that the two of you had, then yes, they are just handling things differently. But that difference can feel brutal if you are still the one emotionally buzzing while they are acting like it's business as usual. So is it feelings or is it hormones? Honestly, it might have started as a hormone crash, but that doesn't mean the emotions you are having aren't real. Sometimes oxytocin absolutely stirs the fucking pot and reveals feelings that were already there, bubbling under the surface. Sometimes it's purely physical. Your brain had a chemical response and now you feel clingy or sad or confused and don't know why. But sometimes what was casual on paper becomes complicated in practice, especially when years of friendship are involved. There's actually no easy line between this is just chemicals and I actually care about this person in a deeper way. Both can be true. In my case, looking back anyway, it was very much a situation where everything else in my life felt a bit unstable and unsafe at the time. And the friendship felt like a happy, safe space. And so I absolutely misconstrued that with thinking it was something more than it was. And I had an inkling it could have been that, but I didn't really figure out that it absolutely was that until after the fact. So what matters more than labeling any feelings is what you do with them. So what now? Be honest with yourself first. Not what you think you should feel, not what you agreed to, what you actually feel. If you are checking your phone constantly, replaying the night over and over, feeling a weird twinge every time they text you something casual, or panicking when they don't, that's a sign. Not that you're crazy, but that your body is asking for clarity and probably another look at the boundaries that are in place, because boundaries aren't static. It's okay to reassess things as we move through life and situations. And you genuinely don't need to justify whatever your feelings are. You just need to acknowledge them, because you don't owe anyone chill. You don't need to maintain a cool, casual, unbothered persona if you are, in fact, extremely bothered. Saying, I thought I could do this and maybe I can't, isn't weak. It's actually very emotionally mature. And honestly, if the friendship is real, it should survive that kind of honesty. And you can say, I thought I'd be fine after we slept together, but I've realized I'm not. Or I'm feeling more emotionally tangled than I expected, and I think I need a little space. Or I care about you too much to pretend I'm totally okay when I'm not. None of those sentences are accusations. They are very simply self-awareness. Obviously, you have absolutely no control over what the other person's reaction will be or how they will handle it. In my case, the other party went on what we'll simply call the worst spiral to have ever happened in the history of the universe, but don't let my experience put you off. I jest. I mean, kind of, because that is actually what happened to me, but I am truly hoping you won't have to deal with that and that it will be received a little bit better. Because the overarching question is, of course, going to be, can you actually be just friends again? And that depends. Can you be around them without wondering if they are texting someone else now? Can you hear about their dating life and not spiral again? Can you trust yourself not to interpret every touch, compliment, or meme as a coded message? If the answer is no, again, that's okay. You aren't obligated to stay in someone's orbit just because the sex was friendly. You are allowed to grieve the change, shift the dynamic, and temporarily step away if you need to. You know, you're not ghosting them forever, but you do have the right to preserve your peace and your heart. And I think the hardest thing to understand is that ruining the friendship, and I say that with strong quotation fingers, isn't always the worst case scenario. Sometimes a friendship changes because it needs to. Sometimes it was already more emotionally loaded than either person wanted to admit. Sometimes sex brings clarity. Maybe you won't go back to how things were before. Maybe the relationship was never completely platonic to begin with, and letting it change doesn't mean it failed. It means it evolved. And I think we equate evolved with growth, and we equate growth with always having to feel like a positive shift. But sometimes things evolve in a way that feel confusing and not growth oriented. But it doesn't mean that change isn't necessary and you won't look back and understand why it happened. I'm a good few years out the other side of my very similar situation right now, so I can reflect in that way. But I know you are slap bang in the middle of it, so that might feel like much too far ahead to think about right now. So all you can really do is focus on how you feel now and move forward as best you can with that information. Casual sex is only truly casual when it feels casual for both people. If you are the only one spiraling, it's not balanced. And doesn't make you a problem at all, but it does mean you are allowed to pause, protect your peace, and decide what version of this relationship still feels good for you. Yes, oxytocin is real and powerful. Yes, your feelings are valid, no matter what you agreed on beforehand. No, you are not needy or irrational for being affected. And yes, you are allowed to create distance if closeness starts to feel painful. If you need to step away for a while or stop sending each other memes like nothing happened, that is all fine. Yes, communicate it to them as best you can, but it's not being dramatic. It's literally just emotional hygiene. My girlfriend moans exactly the same way every time we have sex. I thought maybe it was just how she naturally sounds, but I accidentally walked in on her watching porn with her headphones in, and she was moaning in a completely different way. I don't want to accuse her of faking, but am I getting the generic version? How do you even bring that up? This is actually a really insightful observation, even if the way you discovered it was completely unintentional. And I think catching someone moaning differently is the kind of thing that can, stop you in your tracks a bit, because it quietly challenges what you thought was real. So the question you are really asking underneath all of this is, am I getting the most authentic version of my partner's pleasure rather than a version they've learned to perform? So is it possible that you are getting a performance in bed? And to be honest, it is possible. And that's not in a sinister or bad way. It's not in a she's deceiving you way, but it might be in a very socially conditioned way. A lot of people, especially women and vulva owners, are subtly and not so subtly trained from a young age that sex is something you perform for someone else. Moaning kind of becomes part of the package deal. And for a lot of women and vulva owners, it's not always about expressing pleasure. It's about signaling it in a way that feels familiar or safe or, frankly, convincing. For most of us, that starts really early. We learn from porn or movies or bad sex education that vocalizing is what you do. So we develop a default sex voice, a greatest hits compilation of sighs and moans that sound like pleasure, even if they are not always synced up to what's really happening inside, because we don't know how to adequately communicate what's actually going on. Maybe we don't even know what we like. We might be nervous to just let our voices do what they actually want to do when we experience pleasure. So what you are hearing might be her bedroom playlist. Well rehearsed, consistent, not fake necessarily, but familiar. So hearing her moan differently while watching porn, yeah, that's probably throwing you, because that version probably feels more instinctive, more like someone letting go, reacting to a sensation or sensations without an audience. So now you probably feel like, wait, where's that sound when I'm involved? But you don't have to take that as a sign that she's faking it with you. She might feel safer being real when she's alone than when she's with someone, even someone she loves. And that's not about you being unsafe. It's about her undoing years of messaging that said her pleasure only mattered if it looked good or sounded right. It's the emotional equivalent of someone always smiling in selfies, even if they're not happy, because that's what they were taught looks good. So what can you do with this new information? You do not want to go in guns a-blazing like, got ya, caught you out. And you don't want to bring it up like a performance review. You want to come in with curiosity, not criticism. You might want to say, hey, this might sound random, but I realized I love hearing you when you really let go during sex. Not just sexy sounds, but the you sounds. And I want to hear more of that if you feel comfortable enough to do so. And that's not accusing, not implying that she's fake. It's just gently inviting her to show more of herself with reassurance that it's safe to do so. And if you want to go there more directly, of course, do that. You can literally just say, I overheard you the other day when you were watching something, and I know I probably wasn't supposed to hear it, but you sounded so raw and real, and it really turned me on, and I would love to create space for that version of you too. And that might feel really vulnerable to say that, but in being that honest, you are just modeling a different version of exactly what you want from her, which is authenticity. And you can also back it up with your own behavior. Make your noises, let yourself be unguarded. Vulnerability can be really contagious. If you let yourself go, it will give her that internal permission and confidence to do the same. And react positively, enthusiastically when she does get loud or wild or different than usual. Show her it's welcome and wanted. And tell her that she sounds hot, not because she's hitting the high notes, but because she sounds real. Pleasure doesn't need a soundtrack to be valuable. We don't need to perform to be sexy. Moaning isn't an obligation, it's an invitation. And you would rather hear her actual pleasure than any polished version of it. So, yes, it is entirely possible you are getting the safe version of her moaning, but that doesn't mean she's not into you. And yes, you can help her feel more comfortable bringing her real self to bed, not by calling her out, but by showing her it's safe to show up as she actually is. Because the hottest sounds in bed are not going to be the ones that she's practiced. They are the ones that she'll never even probably mean to make. If all this goes on and nothing changes and you think maybe the issue isn't the moaning and it's something deeper, come back to me. But I hope maybe that helps or works first. If someone never initiates, does that mean they are not into you, or are we just wired differently? Well, let's start with the raw truth. It feels personal when your partner doesn't initiate. I think we can probably all agree on that. Even if you know they are into you, even if they are great once things get going, there's something uniquely ego wounding about always being the one to say, you wanna? Whilst they are over there like a beautiful sexless cat basking in the sun and waiting to be pet. You know, we want it to feel mildly even. So naturally, our brains spiral. Are they bored? Am I not hot enough? Are they just not that into me anymore? Do they not crave me the way I crave them? These are all very valid thoughts, but let's not skip the nuance, because the truth is, not initiating does not always mean not desiring. Sometimes it does, but often, especially in long-term relationships, it can mean other things. That might be as simple as they don't realize it matters to you. Some people just don't get that initiating is part of feeling desired. Maybe their past partners always took the lead. Maybe they feel they show love in other ways, acts of service, cuddling, texting you memes at 3 a.m. But in their mind, they are showing up and they don't realize that your sex life feels one-sided until you tell them. They may feel anxious or insecure or afraid of rejection because initiating sex, it isn't just about desire, is it? It's very much about vulnerability. You are putting yourself out there, and if we've ever been rejected or teased or shamed for initiating in the past, even subtly, we might feel like better not risk that again. And this is especially common in people who are more passive by nature or who grew up with messaging that made sex feel scary or taboo or performative. Some people never learned how to ask for sex without risking rejection, so they just don't. Some people are incredibly turned on once they are in the moment, but they never make the first move because they've never been taught that initiating could be their role, especially if they've been socialized to be unsure of their own desirability. Maybe they are responsive desire folks, not spontaneous desire folks. Not everyone walks around horny on autopilot. My partner absolutely does. He kind of even puts me to shame. But some people don't think about sex until someone touches their neck or brushes their thigh or whispers something filthy into their ear at brunch. Responsive desire means they might love sex, but they rarely crave it until it's actually happening. And that's not a flaw, but it is a different libido blueprint to work with. Maybe they've just fallen into a comfort loop, especially in long-term relationships. People get comfortable. And while that's great for building a life, it can make people stop trying. If you are always the one initiating and they are always the one saying yes, they might have subconsciously decided, cool, this works, without realizing it's not working for you. So now what? Well, you've got to talk about it. Not in a why don't you want me way, because that's more about insecurity than communication, but in a curious, collaborative, not in bed conversation. Like, I love our sex life. I love how into it you are when we are in the moment. But I've noticed I'm always the one initiating, and I'm starting to feel a little bit like the designated horny one. Can we talk about that? Because yes, it's vulnerable, but it's not blaming. It's very honest. It's not dramatic. You are lighting the match. You're not setting the house on fire. And depending on their response, you will get information and hopefully clarity. If they say, wow, I didn't realize that, let's fix it, then you're just maybe naturally wired a little differently and they are willing to meet you halfway. If they get defensive or shut down, that's also useful information, because now you know it isn't about your sexual wiring or your instincts. It's about resistance or avoidance or emotional disconnection. And you're not asking for a 50-50 split of who initiates. You are asking to feel wanted. And that's reasonable. A simple hand on your thigh, a suggestive glance, a hey, get in the bedroom now text. While these things don't feel like they take much, they do shift the emotional load so that you are not the only one carrying the weight of your shared libido like a very sexy backpack up Mount Everest. So no, a lack of initiation doesn't automatically mean they are not into you, but it does mean something is misaligned. whether it's their libido style, their emotional state, or the assumptions they are making about how your sex life works. But don't seethe in silence. Have the conversation. The goal is not to guilt them into pouncing on you. It's to make the invisible dynamic visible so that you can co-create a rhythm that feels more mutual for both of you. And get specific about what initiation actually looks like to you. For a lot of people, initiating can feel quite vague. One partner might think they are being flirty by brushing your leg, and another person might want a full come to bed now announcement with lighting cues. So ask each other, what does initiation feel like to you? What small things can I do that turn you on or signal interest? What would it look like if you initiated more often? Because you might discover that your partner thought they were initiating or that they just didn't know where to start. That kind of clarity really matters. And create a shared turn-on menu. If your partner struggles to come up with ideas, build a shared menu. Things they can do to initiate in ways that feel authentic and sexy to both of you. Like, send me a text during the day that hints at what you want to do later. Start kissing my neck if I'm cooking. Come and sit on my lap while I'm working. Say, I want you out loud with eye contact. Whatever it is that works for you. You know, there's such a vast array of signals out there. But it's not about scripting sex. It is about giving your partner confidence and language. It's saying, here's how I like to be wanted. I'm giving you the roadmap. And if someone is insecure about initiating, this will actually really help them to know that the things they are going to try actually get you going. Create that safe space for them to try initiating, because desire grows in safety, not shame. Check for deeper blocks. Sometimes a lack of initiation isn't about logistics or laziness. It's about emotional blocks, resentment, unspoken stress, or even things like unacknowledged body image issues. You know, is there anything that's been getting in the way of your desire? Is there something I do that makes it harder for you to initiate? Do you feel pressure to perform when it comes to sex? These are all questions that you can have with each other. Like, that's a really intimate conversation. No one's fishing to be the person to blame, but we do want to start opening up the door to that kind of honesty, which might lead you to somewhere more meaningful than just who starts things. What you're really looking for is balance, a sense that desire is being shared, not extracted, that you are not always the hunter chasing the prey, that you get to feel pursued too. And even small shifts, a hand, a whisper, a look, can carry a ton of that weight when they are offered intentionally. The bottom line is, if your partner never initiates, it doesn't mean they don't want you, but it does mean the sexual dynamic needs attention. Because being desired isn't and shouldn't be a luxury in relationships. For most people, it's a need. And wanting that isn't clingy or shallow, it's human. So bring it up, talk it through, make it playful, not painful. And remember, desire doesn't have to be spontaneous to be real. It just has to be shared. What's one bedroom rule that should be an actual law? One? I'm not giving one. I'll give like 5. Don't treat sex like a CrossFit challenge. You don't get a gold star for going 45 minutes if half that time felt like an angry jackhammer on autopilot. Longer does not equal better. That you actually have to communicate with your partner or partners about your sex life. If someone says, I'm close, maintain the rhythm. Lock it in. The clitoris is not a Rubik's Cube, and this is not the time for improvisational jazz. Aftercare isn't extra. It's part of the sex. If you've just shared your bodies, your energy, your fluids, maybe even your soul, the least you can do is be kind after. Whether that is a cuddle, a glass of water, just don't be immediately rolling over like you're clocking out of a shift at IKEA. Sex toys and lube should be on everyone's nightstand or bedside table. They are your companions, not your competition. But if I had to give one, the big one, it is of course consent related, which, yes, to a very technical degree is supposed to be an actual law, but it isn't a one-time sign-off. It is continuous. It can be revoked at any time. It covers who, what, how, where, and with what boundaries. It's not a mood killer. It's the reason sex can be hot, safe, and free in the first place. Consent doesn't magically cover all subcategories just because someone said yes to one version of sex. Sex can be wild, messy, emotional, funny, loud, but it should never be unsafe, coercive, or one-sided. So if we are passing laws for the bedroom, we start with ongoing, enthusiastic consent and communication, and we build a beautifully horny democracy from there. How much should your partner care about your sexual past, and how much is too much? Short answer is not much. Long answer, enough to understand how you got here, but not enough to make it a courtroom deposition a la Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni. Your partner should care about your past the same way they care about your other life experiences, with curiosity, respect, and zero entitlement. Your past shaped you, it didn't define you. If they are curious, cool. If they are obsessed, red flag. A little curiosity is completely natural, but judgment is just insecurity in costume. Like, they are your partner. They are not interviewing you for a purity competition. They're getting to know you. And that's a crucial difference. Your sexual history isn't some shameful archive locked in a vault. It's just another lens through which someone can understand who you are, how you've learned, what you've unlearned, where you've been vulnerable, how you've experienced pleasure, what your boundaries are, what shaped them, what lights you up, and what's off the table. It's a story, not a scoreboard. So here's what I think is fair. Wanting to understand your preferences, boundaries, and emotional triggers. Asking about STI safety and sexual health. Wanting context for how you view intimacy and relationships, and wanting to build closeness by understanding how you've evolved. Here's what I don't think is fair. Using your body count as a moral barometer, punishing you emotionally for past experiences, repeatedly fixating on details that are irrelevant to your current relationship, and making you feel like your past somehow cheapens your present. If someone is asking from a place of connection, amazing. If they are interrogating you from a place of insecurity, it's a no. It's also worth saying, people tend to focus on the sexual part of sexual past when sometimes they are threatened by the emotional intimacy you've had with other people. That how many people have you been with can be code for how many people have seen you, known you, touched the parts of you I haven't gotten to yet. And that can create fear. And whilst that fear is human, it's not your burden to soothe it by pretending to have some kind of clean record or whatever they expect. Because no one gets to start from scratch in adulthood. We all come with baggage. The goal at this point isn't to show up empty-handed, it's to carry your stuff well. I'm always very honest about my sexual and relational past, which for any frequent listeners, I think it's fair to say that might be an intimidating past to feel like you are contending with if you are someone who is inclined to feel insecure about your partner's pasts. But I do think a lot of my relational and sexual past got me to where I am now, and I do think a lot of it helps to make sense of who I am. And I'm lucky that I have a partner who, in the most positive way, doesn't care. If there are details or stories that are pertinent to something, we share them. But I can't imagine for a second either of us would ever want or need to have a what's your body count conversation, because it makes absolutely no odds to me. So if sharing about your past makes you feel more understood, that is intimacy. If it makes you feel judged, ashamed, or less valued, that's a partner trying to hijack your story to soothe their own discomfort. Also, how much do they share about their past? Does talking about your past feel like a two-way conversation or a courtroom cross-examination? Because if it's the latter, you are not in a relationship, you are in a weird retroactive loyalty test that is a waste of everyone's time and energy. Ultimately, your past deserves to be acknowledged, not weaponized. And your partner's ability to hold space for all of you, past, present, and future, is what separates emotional maturity from sexual policing. What's the difference between a dry spell and just not wanting anyone? Well, I feel like a dry spell feels like a lack or a lull or a bit of an unanswered craving. For me, a dry spell usually comes with a bit of horniness, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's a bit quiet. But there's definitely still a part of me that feels like I want intimacy and sex and someone to push me up against a wall for a hot second. You know, I feel a bit frustrated because the engine is running, but the garage is locked, if you will. That's what feels like a dry spell to me. And then not wanting anyone feels like the engine isn't even on. But either way, I mean, it doesn't mean that something is wrong, because I think there's a weird cultural expectation that we should always want to be dating, always want to be flirting, always want to be touched or wanted or just in the game in some way or another. But sometimes you're not in a dry spell. You've just fully taken your libido off the market for a seasonal reset, as we know I do every winter when I basically completely lose my sex drive because I'm too cold. Obviously, I haven't gone through a winter with my current partner yet. Lucky him. But actually, just not wanting anyone could be for loads of reasons. Are you healing from something emotional? Maybe you're exhausted by people who say vibe instead of making actual plans. Maybe you are burnt out, overworked, overstimulated. Maybe you're finally happy alone and you just don't want to mess it up with someone else's fucking socks in your laundry. Or you are just genuinely not feeling it and your libido is like, catch me later. That doesn't mean your libido is broken. It just doesn't run on demand, because desire is not a straight line. It waxes, it wanes, like the moon, which we all know I'm obsessed with. And sometimes it just fully goes on vacation without leaving a note. And a dry spell feels like you are missing something. A true don't want anyone phase feels like you are just fine without it. And that difference matters, because one is a phase that might need a little kickstart, like a new toy, a flirty chat, maybe even a little fantasy journal. And the other might just be a sign to rest and reconnect with yourself and stop doom scrolling through other people's happy couple reels and being made to feel like that's a requirement. So check in with your body, with your brain. Ask yourself, am I frustrated or am I actually relieved? Sometimes what we call a dry spell is just the absence of pressure. You aren't chasing, you aren't performing, you aren't contorting yourself into dating app bios or small talk that goes nowhere. That might feel like a weird loss, but it might be freedom in disguise. Are you craving sex or just closeness? I think it's easy to confuse horniness sometimes with the desire to be held or seen or known. If what you really want is intimacy, the soft, tender, emotionally exposed kind, then no amount of hookup frustration is going to scratch that itch anyway. And that's okay. It just means what you are missing isn't physical, it's emotional, which is a different kind of hunger. Are you lonely or just alone? Because we throw those words around like they are interchangeable, but they are not. Loneliness is feeling like something is missing, like you are waiting for a connection that's not showing up. Alone is choosing your own company and actually enjoying it. If your solitude feels rich, calm, you're not missing out. You're resting, you're reconnecting, you are protecting your peace. Is this just a pause, or is something deeper going on? Sometimes low desire is circumstantial, winter blues, burnout, stress. Other times it is pointing you towards something important like emotional fatigue or a body that needs a little self-care before it can or wants to feel pleasure again. Ultimately, whatever you are going through is about curiosity of your own body and mind without judgment, because desire is not some productivity metric. You don't owe the world a constant state of flirtation. Whether you are in a dry spell or a dormant phase of literally not wanting anyone, you are still whole. You are still worthy. You are still allowed to take your time. And if you are worried that spark won't come back, it will. Eventually, when your body, your heart, your nervous system feel ready. Until then, let this quiet be a kind of pleasure too. Let stillness feel like safety, because I promise you, someone will probably come along and you'll think back to this time and there'll be things you miss about it. What are your thoughts on consensual choking, specifically if she suggests it and enjoys it? Welcome to the spicy side of the menu. Choking is much more common than people admit. But consensual, of course, choking, if it's done safely, intentionally, and enthusiastically, It can be intense and incredibly hot. I love it. And yes, the key word here is consensual. If she suggested it, she enjoys it, and you both talk through the logistics, then it's not a kind of abuse. It's a negotiated power exchange, and that is very different. And the fact that she's the one bringing it up, that's a green flag. It means she knows what she wants. She trusts you enough to say it out loud, and she's not afraid to explore her sexuality. That's hot. Now, let's strip away the scandal and look at the psychology. For a lot of people, particularly those who identify as submissive or who enjoy surrender play, choking isn't about violence. It's about intensity. It's about vulnerability. It's about giving over control in a very primal way. When done safely and consensually, choking can create a rush of endorphins and adrenaline and consequently trust, because it's not about harm. It's about high stakes intimacy in a safe container that you both control. But here's the part where we need to slow down and be grown-ups. Choking carries real risks. Not maybe it'll sting a little risks. We are talking restricted blood flow, potential nerve damage, potential loss of consciousness. So this is not something to just wing because you saw it in porn or because she moaned a bit when your hand was near her neck. Do not freestyle with someone's trachea. So let's talk about the ground rules for safe consensual choking. The goal is to never crush someone's windpipe. The choking that actually feels good is about light pressure on the sides of the neck. Most of the time, obviously, people who are heavily into kink may have more intense feelings about this. I am going with a generalization, a safe generalization. But you want to focus on the sides of the neck where the carotid arteries are, which can create a head rush sensation when done briefly and carefully. Pressing directly on the throat is a no-go unless you have really studied up. And before you ever touch a neck, have a full non-sexy conversation. What do you want to feel during this? What is absolutely off limits? Do you want light pressure or a more full-on role play? How will you let me know if something feels off? Establish a safe word and a physical signal like tapping out, especially because choking can impair speech. Safety is not a buzzkill, it's what makes it hot. There's no real surrender if someone doesn't trust they'll be taken care of if necessary. And check in even mid-play. During the act, watch for signs. Lips turning blue, bad. Stay tuned in. Hot doesn't mean reckless. If you are leading, you are also responsible. And don't do it under the influence. Alcohol, drugs, even being too emotionally charged, these can mess with your judgment, and breath play requires precision. It's not a party trick. If you are not completely in control of yourself, you don't have any business controlling someone else's breathing. And debrief after. Ask what felt good, what didn't, what she wants more of next time. This turns a kink into a shared language, and that's the sexiest part. But also, let's mention, what if you aren't into it? Because that is also totally valid. Boundaries work both ways. If you are uncomfortable with choking, even if she enjoys it, you don't owe anyone a performance that makes you feel unsafe or anxious. Maybe you explore other forms of dominance, restraint, hair pulling, certain types of dirty talk or role play. Or maybe you slowly build comfort over time with different lighter elements of breath play. What matters is mutual enthusiasm, not obligation. It's not about being the cool partner or the kinky one. It's about being a partner who listens and respects limits and doesn't try to squeeze their ego into someone else's neck. So if she asks for it and you are open to learning, take it seriously, do it right. Watch tutorials from actual kink educators, not just porn stars on a futon in Miami. Understand the anatomy. Communicate. Literally communicate like you are co-planning a heist. Because remember, kink is only sexy when it's grounded in care. That way, what you are doing isn't just hot, it is conscious, connected, and above all, safe. After 4 years of being single, I finally found someone I actually like. Not just he's nice, but the kind of person I want to delete the apps for. But now that I'm in a relationship, I've noticed that I kind of miss being selfish. I miss masturbating whenever I want, flirting with strangers at the gym, and not sharing my snacks. Is it normal to low-key grieve single life, even if you are happy in your relationship? Hell yes, it's normal. I mean, I could have probably written this question myself. I feel a bit like I'm being punked because I am also in a relationship after over 4 years of singledom. And let's be honest, long-term singlehood can be a fucking vibe. It's not just about not having a partner. It's about building a whole ecosystem that is perfectly calibrated to you. You eat what you want, sleep what you want, hook up or don't when and how you want. You can masturbate in the morning, the afternoon, at 2 a.m. while watching a true crime documentary. No one's there to judge. Your life is your own solo mission and you've gotten really good at it. And then suddenly, bam, you meet someone who makes you want to share a bed and a toothbrush cup. And while that's real and exciting and intimate, it's a little bit disorienting. Not because anything is wrong, but because, yeah, shit has changed. And even that good change can feel like loss because you are mourning a part of your identity that actually no longer runs the show. But the solo version of you isn't gone, but she is evolving. And of course, it can feel a little nerve-wracking because sometimes I feel like, am I still fun? Am I still wild? And yes, I'd like to think so anyway. Hopefully my partner actually thinks so too. But when you talk about things like masturbating whenever you want, you can still do that. And you should. Being in a relationship doesn't mean you have to surrender your independence like you're at airport security. You are allowed to miss the ease of selfishness, and you are also allowed to find ways to preserve it. Masturbate anyway. Even if you are having great sex, masturbation is about you and your body. That is not a betrayal. It's a self-check-in. It's ongoing information for yourself. That is okay. Masturbation should never stop being yours just because you are partnered. I do not masturbate any less now that I'm in a relationship. I don't believe my partner does either. It is ongoing data of knowing what feels good, learning new things that we can then communicate to them. Masturbation is and will always be healthy. Do not stop that. You don't have to erase your charm or pretend you are blind to hot people. A little smile at the gym doesn't mean you are emotionally cheating. You are just alive. You are still magnetic. Let yourself feel it. And then you can bring that energy home. Schedule alone time the way that you would schedule date night. Go for dinner alone, have a solo Sunday morning. Just make time for whatever the hell you want to do with nobody in your space. That also reminds your nervous system you haven't disappeared, but you have made room for someone else too. Don't share the snacks if you don't want to, or probably do, because it's a nice thing to do. But, some things are sacred. Let your partner know that you are a dragon guarding your hoard of Kinder Buenos or whatever your snack is. But your independence is still very much intact. In terms of alone time, this was something I was actually going to talk about on my episode about being in a relationship, is I have no desire to live with someone full time ever again. And my partner knows that. I said that on our first date. I am willing to increase over time to maximum 5 days a week. I want 2 nights a week to myself. And that is probably just to lather on fake tan, put on a face mask, put on a hair mask, eat pizza in bed, watch shit TV, and just have no one next to me. There's nothing sordid. I'm not like, because I want to go out and do XYZ. I literally probably want to be like the most disgusting version of myself without my partner lying next to me. Let's like preserve the idea that version of me doesn't exist. I'm joking. He's welcome to see every version of. But, that is important to me. And whether you want to eventually live with someone full time or not, whatever, it is so important to make time for yourself and your friends. You don't have to become codependent and integrate every part of your life. Maintain that independence and find a way to make it work for both of you, because I would like to think that this new partner of yours would want to do the same thing. The real work of relationship isn't about losing yourself. It's about expanding yourself to include someone else without collapsing in the process. You are still that deliciously autonomous, sex positive, masturbatory creature. You are just now choosing to let someone into the kingdom, but you're not handing over the keys entirely. I have to be honest, even though just being in a relationship has felt like an adjustment, I do feel like very little has changed. I still feel like I have my independence in place as it was before, but now I also get to hang out with someone that I really love spending time with and being intimate with, but it doesn't feel like a threat to my independence or the person I was when I was single. So don't panic, don't self-sabotage, don't convince yourself it's doubt when it might just be nostalgia. It's a little whiplash from shifting gears. And it's definitely something to notice, but not to fear. Feel it, name it, maybe laugh about it, and then go and make out with your partner and share your snacks with pride. You're not losing yourself. You are just learning how to share the space. Lastly, someone has asked if I consider myself ambiamorous because I seem comfortable both in monogamous and polyamorous relationships. And as I mentioned in my last episode, I take every relationship and partner as it comes, and we discuss what works best for us in that context, as I'm relatively fluid. And I'm currently in a monogamous relationship, so that's where I am at. But whilst I can be comfortable in open relationships, I'm not so much into full polyamory. So let me unpack that a bit for the person who sent this question in. For anyone who doesn't know, I believe it is still a relatively new term. Ambiamory is a term for people who feel equally at ease and fulfilled, whether they are in a monogamous relationship or some form of polyamory. It's like being bilingual in relationship styles. You can speak both monogamy and polyamory fluently and feel happy and secure in either. Ambiamorous folks might switch back and forth or just genuinely thrive in both environments. And open relationships and polyamory aren't exactly the same thing. So when I say I am comfortable with open relationships, I mean I'm okay having a primary partnership and also having sexual connections outside of a relationship. The focus is on honesty, boundaries, and yes, freedom to explore, but the emotional core stays anchored in one primary partner. And polyamory, on the other hand, often there's so many different types, which I have gone into at length before, but I'll just keep it brief for this episode. It often means juggling multiple emotional and romantic connections simultaneously, which to me, because that isn't what I am necessarily into, to me that looks more complex, as it involves building multiple partnerships that may all be significant in different ways. Some people love that dynamic, and obviously for them, that would feel much more comfortable and more easy. Others find it overwhelming or not their cup of tea, which is how I personally feel for that version of polyamory. For me personally, obviously, as we know, I respect any relationship structure that anyone wants to navigate. There is not a single one, apart from anything that is dishonest or disrespectful, there is not a single relationship structure that I turn my nose up at. I respect them all. So when I say something doesn't feel comfortable or easy for me, that is simply just my personal feelings on that version of something. For me, full polyamory feels like a lot to manage and emotionally intense in ways that I could not see myself looking for. But open relationships where there's clear communication and a stable primary connection with room for outside experiences, that can work for me. But I wouldn't call myself ambiamorous. I'm just fluid in this respect. I just want to navigate each relationship as it occurs, and that is perfectly valid. And right now, I am in a monogamous relationship. And I know that labels can feel helpful to describe ourselves, but they are never the full story. What matters is knowing your boundaries, being honest with your partners, and finding what feels authentic and sustainable for you. And if you are curious about your own relationship style, ask yourself, do I want emotional connections with multiple people? Or do I just want the freedom to explore sexually outside of a primary partner? Or am I happy in a monogamous relationship? Or all the versions of these structures that are available to you? There is no one right answer. Just do what fits you. Friends, lovers, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today. And thank you again so much for all of your questions. I am so sorry for the ones I couldn't get to, but I hope they will be answered over the course of this season. Or you can, as always, contact me directly and I will respond to you personally, either via email or via direct message on Instagram. I can't say it enough how much I appreciate the trust you put in me with these episodes, and I really hope that the things we've discussed today have helped in one way or another. I will be back very soon with the next episode of Sex on the Peach, but for now, thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love.